Hello and welcome to episode 58 of the Foundry Roundtable, the podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your tame Foundry author, Drogon1701. With me is Amazon.com delivery drone, Greendragoon.
Do drones actually talk or have podcasts?
An interesting existential question. We'll have to get into that later.
Or in the meantime, I've got a package to deliver.
Yeah, we'll let him go do that. While I introduce Star Trek Online exchange bot, Markhawkman.
No.
You mean to say you're not one of those mythical exchange bots that's driving prices up on the exchange? I was sure you were one.
I'd have more UC if I was, but no.
And in honor of a movie coming out this weekend, we have with us a scrapped Sentinel prototype, Hippiejohn.
You keep giving away all of my secrets. Like, every week, a new piece of my identity is peeled away. Pretty soon, everyone's going to know that I'm the rabbit.
See, the only true things that I say in these introductions are about you.
I know. Well, eventually people will know that I led Alice down that hole.
That was your first mistake. But we welcome back to the show our guest, SirBoulevard.
Great to be back, like always.
So, Foundry news. We're basically in a bit of a holding pattern at the moment. The Foundry is up, everything is working, but reviews remain turned off until spotlights can be updated, which is not a quick process. I mean, I've been through it a while back. They took down all of the Purity series so we could make a few updates to that, and it was a bit of a lengthy process, actually. Smirk said that he was working on this earlier in the week. He said he was hoping to have something for us on it by the end of the week, but I haven't seen any posts from him yet today. Hopefully we'll get some news on that. But he did do a live stream earlier today. I imagine that keeps him quite busy. Interestingly, another piece of news in that live stream, in the Q&A questions from the forums, which he does at the end of the live streams now, he answered a question from Greendragoon.
Oh, serious? I missed it.
Yeah, I didn't see you in there. I didn't know if you were watching or not.
No, I had to go. It was the end of my work day, and so I had to go home.
Amusingly enough, he did mispronounce your name, like so many others do. He called you Green Dragon.
Yeah, well, it throws people off.
There is another O, Smirk, if you're watching or listening. So let's see. You asked about small updates coming to the Foundry, since we know we're not getting big updates from Captain Gecko's comments. He did not say anything specific about future updates. He did say he was aware of the small updates we've gotten lately, and that he was aware that these were not in the patch notes, and that this is something that he was going to work on internally. Obviously, I think that's good. As you know, that's something I've harped a bit on the show over the years.
If people could actually see me, the smile on my face is so big right now. It's gigantic.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic.
Good. It's good Smirk has top men working on this.
Top men.
Now, speaking of those small updates, one was discovered by a few authors. I think Ashkirk was one, maybe. I'm not sure who exactly, but it was like right after last week's live broadcast of this show. In addition to getting the new standard Odyssey uniforms applied to a lot of our pre-made NPCs, it turned out that some of them, the ones that were named starting with Starfleet Captain, to be specific, are now wearing MACO armor. Now, I'm pretty sure that the reason this got changed is because these pre-made NPCs come directly from the combat groups. I mean, these are the guys that spawn when you throw down a captain-level Federation combat mob.
Yeah. These are basically our NPC contact access to those NPC groups.
Yeah. Now, I mean, I'm not a programmer, and so this is just guesswork on my part, but I think that it's essentially programmed to go and fetch these NPCs from the main game database. So when you throw down a combat mob, it puts down the same one that comes from the main game. So if they change that
Heretic
one,
and
ours has
Vortex
changed.
Heretic and Vorticus have on a few occasions mentioned that the game uses several different, I guess you could say, layers of tables for things like that. And one change in one place will, sometimes propagate to some place where you didn't expect it to propagate to.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, it's
And
Kind of like how the past versions of Klingons ended up with bio-neurotorpedoes.
Yeah.
yeah, and
which has
it's
fixed.
sorry.
Did
But
they
I mean,
fix that?
They did fix that. They got rid of that about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Oh,
Yeah, they
okay.
did that a while ago.
But
I
yeah,
did
I
not
mean,
know that.
in this particular case, it's one where I think how it's labeled for us in the Foundry is a bit confusing. And it threw a lot of people off because when a average typical Foundry author reads Starfleet Captain, they assume like captain of a ship. But in this case, it goes back to when the game was made, and they assigned ranks to all of the different difficulties of the mob, their NPC mob character. And so it's one of those cases where the toughest type of NPC mob we have is a captain. And in fact, I mean, if you look at all the NPC groups, we have captain groups, commander groups, and I think the disconnect comes in where we see captain think like captain of a starship or a captain type character, and when they're actually using it for is just a designation for a really tough boss.
Okay, real quick, I got an update. Captain Smirk just posted in the official forums that the featured spotlight missions that need to be unlocked in order for people to, put it in new directions to their Earth space dock doors have been unlocked.
Awesome.
So anybody who has a Foundry mission, hopefully they got them all. The ones that start at the spotlight ones that start at ESD, go in and change your mission.
Breaking news.
So once we get that all done, we can, and those respotlighted, we can get reviews turned back on.
I definitely want to give a shout out to Smirk and Humor Boy and Cryptic Frost for just kind of working through to kind of get these issues taken care of. They've definitely been very responsive in trying to deal with all the issues that came out of the transition.
I think they've been doing a good job.
I actually want to put a personal thank you to Smirk because he actually plugged my spotlight mission during the stream today. So
yeah, I noticed that he was talking about what was it, Honor of Farasa?
Yeah, so it's good to know that at least he's trying to put some more news out there for the Foundry authors.
I know a discussion came up, I think on Twitter on the forums, kind of about that some people kind of thought he wasn't as engaged with Foundry, but I think it's not that he isn't engaged. I think it's just that he is, because he's the new community manager, he's kind of working his way into all of the aspects that Brandon used to take care of. So,
and I mean, he is different from Brandon. He's going to do things differently.
I like what I posted. I hope nobody took the wrong way. I was just like, he's a different person. He has different priorities, different things that, like, right now, those live streams have been improving every week. Every week that he does a live stream, it's better. I'm glad that's one of his priorities right now. So yeah, I hope nobody misinterpreted that I was like, oh, he's got the wrong priorities. No, he's just got different ones, and that's fine. I mean, he's a different person.
Well, and that was specifically referencing something that I said, which was, that he had posted a goofy message in a thread that was about a Foundry exploit, and I was like, oh, not take this seriously or what? And he's like, well, yes, I also reported it to our QA team. I was like, oh, I feel like a jackass now.
Yeah, I will say this: Smirk does play Foundry missions. Literally after Farasa was spotlighted, he and I had a conversation for like 2 days talking about how could we make crazier NPC mobs in the Foundry. So I know he cares about the Foundry.
Nice.
He cares. From what I can gather, he likes stories. That he's not just, he doesn't just love blowing things up. He's a Trek fan. He likes things that make him think of Trek. So of course he's going to like the Foundry. At least we hope he is.
I'm pretty sure even Brandon said when he first came on that he was a longtime Trek fan, and apparently could Trek trivia Brandon under the table.
Well, yeah, I mean, he throws it out a lot in the live streams when you listen to him. So I mean, he's definitely, you can't question his Trek credentials.
So since we're talking about that right now, I only have one problem with the change to the MACO thing. And if you say that that Smirk had said he notices that these things were not in the patch notes, and he'll start looking at that internally. That's the answer that I need to hear there, because the change is a pretty, to me, changing the mobs from the captain level mob. Now, I don't think of them as captain of a starship. I just think of them as the difficulty level of a mob. But I can certainly see in some of my own missions that are no longer that I'm rolling into other things I'll talk about later. But I had thought that, the mob was going to look a certain way because that's what was in there. And now all of the captain level mobs are changing in a pretty specific and a very noticeable change, in my opinion. So I know that it's just something that's propagating down, that it's just coming because the mobs are changing within the game, they're updating the artwork, etc., etc. But I think it would show a little bit of care to the Foundry community to say, we're making this change and we expect that it may propagate down to the Foundry. Just be in communication with us and let us know about something that is in effect a major change. I'm not saying it's a bad one. I've wanted MACOs to use forever in certain things and in certain circumstances. So I'm super happy that it was done. But I really wish that we had been informed that the change was happening, so that anyone who was using those mobs or using their maps that had small things changed in them too, according to Zorbane, these things didn't make it into patch notes again, and therefore if people aren't paying attention to the community, they're not going to know these changes happened, and it could potentially alter the intent of scenes in their missions. So I just want that.
I know that I've used these mobs specifically as just Starfleet officers, just generic Starfleet officers when I need them.
Well,
so, I'm going to have to go into my missions and make sure that I'm not using them that way anymore.
Well, I got two things to say about this personally. One is something that happened about a year and a month ago while I was one of the first testers for Legacy of Romulus, and I was doing Foundry testing as well during that period, and I was Sila's asset got updated in the Foundry, and so I turned to tweeted Brandon, I'm like, hey, did you know Sila's asset in the Foundry was updated with the most recent patch? And he tweeted back and he goes, Sila's asset's in the Foundry? And so, same thing happened with Hakeev. Like, we weren't aware these guys were in the Foundry. I think that what's happened is, you guys had Cryptic judging a couple of weeks back, and he said, when you look at the list of what's in the game for them, we at least have a preview option. What they see is just a list of names and stuff. I don't think they know what's in the Foundry and what's linked together.
But I think the reason that happened is because someone, if you look at the descriptions of, say, the NPC contact that we have, that is a Romulan ensign that looks just like Sila. It's not named Sila. It's named Romulan ensign number whatever. That the description of that is this woman was told she looked like Empress Sila all her life or something like that. It's because we had a dev at some point getting a lot of stuff in there for us and putting, like, there's this gem Hadar counted to 10 on his fingers and things like that. But let me finish. So that's a contact asset that somebody put in. That it's possible that they could lose a contact asset. I think what I'm talking about is something different, though. They're changing the way that a mob group functions within the game, and that they know that's going to propagate anywhere that mob groups are used. I just want them to have told us about it. Is all.
Now, here's the question: I think this is the question that SirBoulevard is asking: is do they know that?
And that's one of those things that I think about half the development community has the Foundry on their mind, and then they try to work in like little additions and whatnot when they can, and then the other half isn't even on their radar, and so they never even occurs to them.
They make this change, and it might not occur to them that this propagates
that's
down the Foundry.
That's actually my
Right.
second point. My second point. I'm actually not done with the first one yet. The point I learned at that time was they don't always know when something propagates into the Foundry. Now I agree that they should have said, "Hey, we're doing a massive update. All these artworks are going to be changing. It may propagate into the Foundry." I agree with you on that one, Hippie. The second point
that's
is,
all I'm saying.
yeah, the second point that you guys were just bringing up is this is a change to the general mobs, and I think they knew it was going to affect the Foundry. But I've also noticed that this is a very specific change, and I think I know why they did it. Which was before they were labeled as this is a Starfleet captain. Now it's a Starfleet MACO, and I kind of get the change, which is, okay, our character is unique in the fact that they've got a first officer that's pretty lenient on the rules, and they have a dual commission with the MACOs. They go on away missions. But most of the rest of the captains has a Riker there going, you're not going down to the planets. So they're going in and they're fixing it up, and now they're not captains anymore. Okay, what's one step higher than a Starfleet commander? Well, we're not sending the captain. As Kirk said, that's a rare commodity. Let's send a MACO down. So I think that was a change that was done specifically to fit more in the lore, and it affected the Foundry in that way. And it's just kind of we've got to kind of deal with it and maybe reskin our mobs from now on with the captains. It's annoying.
Well, I'm still going to have to point at the bioneural incident earlier.
So
Well,
I'm gonna say
Because
flip
when,
that around
when they
and
added
say
bioneural torpedoes to the Klingon mobs, they got propagated to the Foundry stuff too.
Right,
Yeah,
but
it's
they
certainly
took
not
care
the
of
first
that.
time this has happened.
Yeah,
So
and
Um,
I'm
There
going to
was
flip this
one-
around and say that there's actually a
Okay.
different design philosophy behind this, and that is if you look at a really tough player, captain, they're probably decked out in MACO armor.
yeah,
So I
That's
mean,
true.
it's not that. I mean, if you run around and see like tougher Federation characters in like the Dyson Battle Zone, they're wearing MACO armor.
some of them, yeah.
So I
well,
mean,
that again, it goes back in with the hand wave of why our captain's going down, because at level 45 we get a dual commission with MACO. So
I don't know that they thought. I think you guys, the two of you, just thought about it more than they did.
probably
I
true.
honestly,
It's very possible.
I honestly think that they have this cool costume, and they're trying to get it in there, and a really good place to use it is in, MACOs are supposed to be MACOs, and it's great to put them in as the toughest Federation mob that you could possibly face. That makes a lot of sense. It's almost the squirrel incident. It's almost the squirrel thing, that now something that is labeled as simply Federation Captain is no longer actually just a standard Federation mob. Now they are something that looks like MACOs. Again, I'm glad they're there. I really am. It's just...
Definitely opens up some possibilities for doing
Well-
things in the Foundry, because we've never had MACOs before in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
definitely. But Hippie, I actually have to disagree with you on this one for one reason, and that is Thomas the Cat and Tumor Boy, when the uniform started coming out on Tribble, they were very active at talking with the community about they were having very specific design choices with all of the Federation stuff. Taco posted on Reddit a whole list. He's supposed to have a blog out already, but they keep postponing it.
Oh, you mean Thomas's blog
Yeah.
about
the
The color scheme. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he on Reddit, he was talking about he had such detailed, like, he had thought it out and even came up with different colors for Starfleet MACO and Starfleet Marines in case they happen to be different units. I mean, I think they really were thinking this through with this design choice, because they weren't able to do it 4 years ago when the game was being rushed. They had to just, whatever we have, we put it in. We didn't even get MACOs into the game for another 2 years after that. And now they have a chance to fix that. And I think this was a case of, guess what, guys? We're going to really think this through and take our time and make a deliberate design choice.
So, I
It's
mean-
a good design choice, and I don't
Yeah,
disagree with the
absolutely.
choice at all. You tell me about it. That's all.
So a little heads up, yeah, that it might affect the Foundry would have been nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
You'd mentioned something about it being almost a squirrel incident, and the thing with the squirrel incidents is basically that the epos for us basically originally had the name that they had for internal devs, which they were nicknamed squirrels.
Yeah, the devs were calling them squirrels, and that made it into the Foundry as it was like placeholder text.
Well,
Yep.
So,
my understanding of that incident is that the name that we saw in the Foundry mission list is the name that the internal name that the game uses to
That's what we
describe
just
the
said, yeah.
object.
Yeah.
So the argument I would kind of make is that, I mean, as Foundry authors, while we don't have like the dev tools per se, we've got pseudo dev tools in that we are kind of getting a glimpse into the development process. So some of that kind of stuff is almost to be expected.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, Kirkfat has joined us.
He's been up here
There's
for a
Kirk Fat in
while.
the background.
I haven't been actually on the game. I've been on. Wow, Kirkfat's here. Hi, Kirkfat.
Hi Kirkfat. Now, I
promise
mean, here
we're not
is
sitting here exploiting.
I was going to talk about that a little bit later as well.
Yeah, I'm sure we will.
Here is the larger issue though that came up during our discussion on Twitter about this, and this is probably what made Rogue Enterprise cry, or his Twitter cry anyway, his phone possibly, is as Foundry authors, I mean, should we have an expectation that when we make a mission, it will not be changed by something that Cryptic does?
No.
No, we should never have that expectation.
Yeah.
Because the way I've always viewed it is Cryptic is our publisher, and if the publisher changes, you're a writer, Grogan, you know how this is. If the publisher says you make this change, you make this change, and it's no different than
Usually I'm the one saying that, so.
Well, lucky you. But in our case, it's Cryptic is giving us these items, and if for the pre-made stuff, they're always subject to change. Do not expect them to stay the same. If something is important that you need it to stay within a certain design choice, make a custom costume or use one of the costumes is unlikely to change. For instance, if you needed a Starfleet officer who is going to be a commander rank and you want a Starfleet generic commander, use Commander Futagami's asset. She's not going to be changing that much. Just play the system smartly.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was kind of chatting with Zorban, and he was kind of of the opinion that we should expect consistency in the Foundry. And my argument was that if this was a single-player game and we were like working with the modding tools for that, expecting consistency would be totally natural because the base game is not changing at all. However, the fact that we're developing for an MMO changes things completely because the base on which we're building is constantly evolving and changing. So,
yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
Really, I mean, if they did say, for instance, like copy off like all of these NPCs and didn't update any changes, well, then the Foundry would never see any updates, assuming that it even continued to work properly at all.
Yeah, and I would rather, I think, on the whole, I mean, obviously this change is going to require me to do some things to my missions, but on the whole, I would rather they still leave these things connected to the game. So, like, when they updated the Romulan mobs for Legacy Romulus with the nice new models and the new ships and everything, so we get those, and I'd rather have that.
Yeah, and it's
than
much
not.
harder to keep those things in sync. But it requires that we as authors take that into consideration and, as you say, play or build smartly.
Yep.
Yeah. And
despite the fact that this MACO thing's irritating, we've gotten some other stuff that's just nice on top of that. We've gotten the Undine core added to it. We also got the Planet Killer, which was something I didn't expect to see get in there. So this has been overall a good. We got the Planet Killer. Just be careful if you're using the up model because it doesn't have a bottom to it, so stick it in an asteroid.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And see, another thing, not in the patch notes.
Exactly. Tell us these things. It's been an ongoing
I didn't even know that was there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that is an ongoing problem at this point, that things just don't show up in the patch notes, which I guess really my issue is not with the MACO outfits at all. My issue is with I feel like,
Communication.
yeah, that lack of communication, it's starting to, because it's gone on for so long, it starts to feel like we're never even thought of, because they don't even think to tell us something as major as your mob groups are changing, where you're getting this awesome thing like the planet killer to use. Like, we're not that, it starts to make me feel like we're ignored, but I know that we're not, because we're getting cool new stuff. It's just they don't tell us about it.
Yeah.
What do we, where does the communication breakdown happen, and how do we fix that?
Well,
That's
yeah. And it's pretty clear
Well,
that there's
like what I said about the bioneurals earlier, is that I don't think that they actually changed the Foundry stuff intentionally. I think it was just a side effect of them making a sweeping change in the game code.
and that's kind
I
of
th-
Therefore,
yeah, you're absolutely right.
It
And
didn't
the
occur
problem
to
is
them
when
that they were adding stuff to the Foundry.
yeah, the problem is some of it they don't know, and some of it, and when they do know, they don't say anything.
And it's important to remember that the team that developed the Foundry is not the team that's permanently on STO. So I do
right.
think
This is true.
So most of the devs are kind of in the dark of what's linked up, because they've said, certain things have to be ported to the Foundry. Other things are automatically updated to it, and I don't think they know which is which.
I think you're right. Yeah.
but it raises the whole question of whether the updates we do see are intentional or accidental. And
I'm gonna say this from my experience, from what I heard from Brandon. I think about 50% of them are accidental.
Yeah.
of course, then that means that 50% of them are intentional.
Which is a good
and
thing.
and I do think that some of them are, like, maybe somebody adding some of the ships to the costume creator and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I definitely think in that case there's at least a ship artist somewhere that just is gotten into the habit of adding the ships when as part of his normal.
And that actually raises a good point. In conversing with Cryptic Frost on the forums, I asked him because we know that sometimes when you're working with a ship and trying to customize it in the costume creator, it will crash. And there are certain ships that do this a lot. I remember, I don't know, some of the Romulan ships, I think, and some of the Dyson ships that were just added will crash if you try and customize them.
Only the Federation one right now. Oh, there is a new one, though. I should probably warn everyone. Because of the Tempest class, they haven't put it in the Foundry, so if you guys want to make a custom patrol escort, that will crash you guys right now.
Okay.
So
when you encounter these, post a bug report in the forums.
Yeah.
That will make it easier for Frost to track these down and fix it.
Bug can't get fixed if they don't know about it.
Yep. Especially if it's a consistent one.
Yeah.
He really needs to know those. But why don't we move along? Let's talk a little bit about what we've been working on. And I know Hippie has been working on stuff, so let's start with you.
I actually have. I opened up the editor a whole lot this week because I started looking at projects that I was working on that had everything to do with the Federation Klingon War. I've talked about a couple of them on the show, things that I have map pieces made for, or NPCs made for, and beginnings of stories. And with the dawn of season 9 and the end of our featured episode, I don't remember
Surface
the title,
Tension.
Surface Tension, yeah. With the end of Surface Tension, I mean, everything is different now in the universe. And so I started looking at these basically all of these old missions, and I started grabbing pieces of maps and saying, I can really make something here work if I want to write I'm in the process of plugging stuff in, and I have like a mission giver dialogue and a couple of things written, plugged in, but not a lot yet. A story of, I kind of want to retell Star Trek 6 from a Klingon point of view, where it's a new piece, and it's a really hard thing for some people to swallow, people that have been at war for and have reason to hate and reason to want to fight with each other. And I want the player to be assigned to go to where I had originally been building a planet to experience a part of the war. I now want to use that map to have the player go there to tell the general that's there that has lost a lot, including probably like, some, like, I don't know, but he's lost a lot, and the combat that's happening on that planet is very personal to him, and uh, I want to kind of build around that and see if I can't make a mission that has, at least a little bit of impact of you're a Klingon warrior, or you're a member of the defense force, and you're being forced to uh, work with Starfleet in order to secure a peace that not everyone wants, that perhaps even somewhere, your own player character, when you're thinking about it, that you might not want. So that's kind of the idea I've been working with. I've been pulling maps from a lot of different places and putting things together that are a lot of fun. So I got a lot of time in the Foundry this week working on that.
Sounds like fun. Greendragoon, how about you?
Well, I actually got a little time in on part two. I'm kind of up to the point in that bait where you face off against the final boss for the map, and kind of the climax for the mission itself. And it's kind of a tricky one because I want to make it kind of tough, and I've got a couple of factors I need to consider. The big thing is that early on in the mission, you have a choice. You have this second security team that has come with you, and earlier in the mission, this team is holding your escape route, and they come under attack, and they're facing heavy resistance, and you have a choice of retreat and keep your team safe, or stay and try and complete your mission. You have this choice, and um, when you finally get to this boss, um, whether or not you had the team stick around affects whether or not they're available to help you with this final boss. So I've been kind of running through the challenge of how do I balance this in such a way that um, it's hard but not too hard if they don't choose choose to keep the team um, there, and that it's not too easy if the team is there. So I've been kind of back and forth. I've decided that I kind of want to, because I'm working with Orions, and Orions aren't generally that tough to begin with. Um, so I've been thinking about doubling up the group and having like a captain group and like an ensign group. And someone suggested to me.
Yeah, you were talking about that a little bit on Twitter this week, and I said, if you're going to put something with a captain group, I think I wouldn't go higher than lieutenant.
I was going to say lieutenant because I played around with that a lot when I was making Spectres, and for the two groups that I put on the bridge. And in order to go anything higher than lieutenant, I had to pull the captain group down to commander. So what I would suggest there is go lieutenant because ensigns are too easy.
Well, the suggestion was put up to me is that since I'm doing a bunch of trigger work here anyways, I could choose to swap out the like make it an ensign group if it's a if you're alone, or bump it up to lieutenant if you have help. So to kind of even out things, even though so just to make sure that it isn't it's not too easy if you have help, and it's not too hard if you don't.
Dragoon, can I propose another idea though?
Sure, go for it.
Something I did when I did Honor of the Empire was, have you considered making it a gauntlet where you have a group of NPCs on the player side and a group of NPCs that spawn based on triggers on how you kill them, ending at a high level captain mob?
That's not going to work in this situation.
Okay.
But for one, you've only got the one team. I mean, you're not in a position where you can get help.
Okay, fair enough.
And in fact,
I've done something similar to what you say.
Yeah.
Spawning progressively harder mobs that come at you.
Yeah. And my challenge is just trying to find that perfect balance, which may require just some testing.
Well, if you need some playtesters, I'm sure we can oblige.
I don't know anybody who likes to play test missions.
I'll play test stuff.
I'm definitely keeping
So I think he's being sarcastic.
Which players to
I've been known to play test missions that aren't even in my native language.
This is true.
I don't know what they're saying, but this mission is awesome.
It is a Green Dragoon mission, so if you are going to play test it, like block off like an entire afternoon.
Yeah, this is every bit as long as part 1.
Yeah.
As soon as it's playable, and like you can complete it, and there isn't like an empty map somewhere, I am going to start bringing in people to play test and get some feedback.
Nice.
I do a lot of things.
Well, obviously Hippie and I saw a very, very early version quite a while ago.
I can't wait to see the later.
Yeah, we're
version.
eager to see the newest version.
The polished, finished version. Yeah.
It'll still be pretty rough when I get people in, but it'll be more complete and go beyond the path that you stopped at.
Well, let's see. Mark, have you been working in the Foundry much lately?
I did spend a little bit of time going back over some stuff in my old mission, Darkness Between the Stars. Not a lot of time, though, but I did, however, come to some rather interesting things I noticed while I was tinkering, though. And that there's actually one of the Borg maps that has a rather large section of water in it, where when you look down, it's basically like a lake shore sort of thing, and you look down and you see the Borg stuff under the water with that, ground texture, which is really cool, especially since it still has the little glowy bits on the ground under the water.
That was something that,
that
Knight Templar used in his mission that I reviewed a few weeks ago. It was very cool looking.
Yeah. I have to say that particular location on that map you need to be very careful using, because you're going to have to do a lot of set dressing, because you're in the corner of the map that the player was not meant to be in, and when you look at all of the Borg buildings, you're looking at them from the side that was never meant to be seen, and thus, well, it's a one-sided prop.
So you might have to add some more props to get it to look good.
Oh, you're going to have to add more than just a few props.
Yeah, there's a few assets that are really hard to work with.
It's very true.
Indeed.
Well,
but it's a cool location if you can figure out how to make it work.
All right, SirBoulevard, what have you been working on?
Well, most of my time in the Foundry has been spent pretty much testing stuff, because I'm busy helping my fleet out, finishing up our embassy. But I did get some work in time on Sands of Gornar. Basically, because Honor of the Empire ended right before A Step Between the Stars. When service tension came out, I went, oh, all the Klingon members of the High Council are dead. There's still a Gorn that's alive, though.
So that, interestingly enough, that's a question I have. Were those the High Council, or were those just guards?
It seemed
those
like
were they were the High Council. They were sitting in their chairs. The Klingons would not let anyone but the High Council sit in those chairs.
I know. It's just it's so hard that
and we knew the one who spoke. It was Counselor Woldon. He's the only one who.
I know. It's so tough it's so hard to make that work with every time I walk into the Great Hall, they're standing there.
Well, do you know why that is, right?
Well,
it's because you're walking into the Great Hall in 2409.
Well, it's more than that. They can't get rid of those NPCs. We have those NPCs in the Foundry as contacts.
Well, they can remove them from the map.
They could remove them from the map, but they're still talk-to contacts.
Or rename them as new council member.
Pretty much, yeah.
I think that's what I might do in the story.
Recently was I made a list of all of the Klingon houses that are mentioned in the duty officer dialogues.
Right on.
You should post that. That could be useful.
Yeah, that could
There's
be
also
really useful.
don't you investigate several of them during the
Yeah,
It's actually a pretty short list. It's only 6 names or so.
Still, you know what? That's 6 houses that I'm
But
sure
anyways,
the
here,
Klingon authors would be interested in.
Yeah,
I'll,
I could
I'll,
use that.
I'll just
I
read it
would
off
too.
quick.
Are you going to post
Shalak.
it though?
Yeah, I'll get around to that.
Yeah, put it on the forums.
Shalak, Duras, Kalek, Kryton, Sikopa, Tarath, and Woldan.
And
think
all
that's
but
seven.
one of those, have had their leaders killed, because those 5 of those 6 are high counselors.
Yep, all except for
The
Duras.
annoying part is that the one that didn't have their leader get killed is Duras.
Okay, so here's a
Because
question for you, Boulevard.
Jim
With
Potts
that
is of
change
Duras.
happening, the question for you is: with that change happening, how is that changing what you were writing for Sands of Cornar?
Well, the thing was, Hippie, you got around to playing Empire finally, right?
Yeah.
So you know who was was added to the council at the end of that mission.
Right,
So
but
what I ended up doing, because Gornar takes place after surface tension, was the player gets called into Satas's office, and he pretty much goes, "So you really didn't even have to do that thing you did at last time I saw you, right?" The thing I'm kind of just something I wanted to say to Mark. House of Doris isn't evil in this game. Gerard is a dick, but he's not actually evil with all the information we have. So
Bavad holds that title.
Bavad holds that title, and Torg holds that title, and they were friends of Gerard. And there's some ambient dialogue on Drozana that pretty much says Gerard basically got really drunk after finding out what happened to Torg and Bavad at the same time, because it's kind of crushed his career, and he actually turned down a seat on the High Council because he, as he put it, I will return to Kronos the hero or not at all, and his 2 biggest allies just got exposed as giant traitors. So I think
It could be fodder for some Foundry missions here, possibly.
I think that's fodder for some Cryptic missions, because because this is between Slathis being a non-voting member and Gerard being now in a position of, we're out of counselors, you were requested, we're probably going to call on you now. We might see Marktog's house get reestablished on the council out of necessity. This could be a very tumultuous time in the Empire.
So I agree with you. We could see Cryptic do all of that, but we won't.
Probably not. No.
We could see it, but we won't.
No, because I'm sure the story missions going forward will continue the main overarching arc. They probably won't go back to the specific Klingon, specific Federation stuff.
Well, and that's the advantage of the new Accord, though, because as we know, the new expansion coming out is not a new faction, and they've made it very clear expansions will at least have a full storyline like Legacy of Romulus.
Yeah, that kind of size.
They said it would be that kind of size, but they didn't say that it would be a full storyline. If I'm remembering correctly, Gecko said it would be changes to either like systematic changes or huge storyline.
Well, they did say that there was going to be a massive amount of story content.
There's got to be. I mean,
mission.
Yeah, and we're seeing them putting out remastered missions alongside these really great featured episodes. They got the team to finally do it. I think we will be seeing something regarding this. I don't know if it'll be anything really major. Maybe
it could be just a small section within a story mission that mentions these things going on, or you meet Gerard and he's in the council member and he says, "Hey, I just got added to the council."
And I'm hoping for something like that. That's all we really need, bluntly. But anyways,
it doesn't have to be the Abe storyline. It could be the B storyline.
Yeah, it could be the B storyline, and I'm hoping something bigger happens.
What if they did something for like the Day of Honor event, where it kind of goes back and explores? I mean, it doesn't have to be like big combat or anything or massive new levels, but just kind of a little bit of a mission exploring kind of these what kind of effects these things have on each of their factions.
I would love that. Anyways, going back to what I'm doing with my mission, so I'm kind of having to write this, getting more opportunity to write Satas, which I get to talk about a little bit later in the podcast, but I was focusing about focusing on Slathis and the Gorn and all that, and I got to put in a new mechanic because I found out that single soar mob. I don't know if you guys have used that, but I figured out, I could use triggers and make that so I free skinned it as Satas, and I'm chasing him through the streets at one point trying to get to something. So
Yeah, because it's a single mob that you can put a
patrol on.
patrol on. Yeah.
And it's friendly to all factions, just so everyone knows. So
It's a good Foundry top tip there.
Mhm.
So let's see. I was not able to get into the Foundry itself much, but I did some rewriting on Sympathy for the Devil, which is what I'm working on right now. And I actually made a decision. One of the things that I've wanted to do for a while in the Foundry is do a branching storyline where you make a choice at the end of one mission, and based on your choice, I tell you to play either follow-up A mission or follow-up B mission. So the separate storylines are actually separate Foundry missions. Now, to keep it manageable, I'm just going to do this once. So
Is this like a
you play
your own adventure?
a little bit, yes. So, like, you're going to play part 1, you're going to play part 2. At the end of part 2, it says either, okay, you made this choice, you play part 3A, or made this choice, you play part 3B. So your choices will affect what happens. Now, obviously, there's nothing I can do to force you to play either one of these, so it's going to be, on the honor system, you might say. And obviously, it does make more work for me. It's going to be, twice the work of making part 3, which I'd always intended to make a part 3, but it does offer up some interesting things. I think, one of the missions, depending on what choice you make, is going to be, I want it to be like a monster mission. I went and saw Godzilla, which is pretty cool. And so I'm going to take a little inspiration from that and the Japanese kaiju films. I think it's going to be pretty cool. And then I really have no idea what to do with the other part. But obviously, I got to finish part 2 first, as Dragoon probably will sympathize.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you have ideas for part 3.
Well, one thing I just thought
some
of
of my
about
ideas have fallen
Toho's
off.
films is that a lot of Toho's films actually do have something that would be analogous to the way ground combat works in Star Trek Online, because you have the humans shooting at races like the Theotopians and other people that are people and not giant monsters.
Well, in this case, I don't want to reveal too much of it just yet, but it'll be something that is more space-oriented than ground. But more on that later, and you'll obviously figure out what the thing is going to be at the end of part 2 that I'm working on.
So, did you want to talk about the other thing we kind of started brainstorming about?
Yeah, Dragoon and I had a fun idea of a mission where the player finds out that they've been a sleeper agent for the Undine.
Yeah, basically.
Sort of.
Wow.
And what I had in my head was the scene at the end of was it season 3 of Battlestar Galactica, where 4 of the main characters find out that they are Cylons and have been the whole time. And it was a brilliant scene. This music starts playing that like triggers them, and they're wandering through the ship, and suddenly they all end up in the right place and go, "Oh my god, no way!"
I mean, it definitely kind of harkens back to what was that one episode of Deep Space Nine where
Whispers.
Yeah, where you have a duplicate clone O'Brien, but he thinks he's the real one.
He thinks he's the real one. He thinks everybody else is acting crazy, and like everybody else has been duplicated. And so, I mean, there's a lot of different ways you could sort of go with this. And I had the idea of sort of wandering around new ESD, because you can make objectives on social maps, of course. And I think it'd be cool to, and then once you transition to some custom maps, make sort of, the bowels of the station, different levels, and like set the whole thing on ESD. I think it would be
I was
cool.
actually thinking about it, because I mean, I always start with maps and what kind of maps I can make. So I was actually thinking I could do a, the crash starship I have in part 1? I was thinking I could do something.
Brilliant map.
I think I was thinking I could do something similar like that, except have it be a one of those docking umbilicals. So you were running across the docking umbilical into your ship because you can't use the transporters.
Oh,
And if you keep it close enough, all you have to do is that section of the saucer and just keep it generic enough so that it doesn't really look like any specific class.
And I think what would happen sort of like at the end of the mission is you would essentially find yourself, the actual human or whatever species you are version of yourself that's not the Undine. You would find them in stasis or something, and something happened where you would wake them up and it would switch you back. So that when you ended the mission, you're yourself again.
There's actually an interesting thing, if you guys have gotten a chance to read the Stowe novel. At one point, there's a chapter, I think it's with the Jack Pack, and they're talking about that there's a chance maybe some of the Undine agents who have replaced people may have accidentally copied too much of their host's brain patterns and have actually forgotten their Undine and are actually just living as normal people.
I mean, you could definitely have a lot of fun with it. Because
it's a lot of it's a storyline that has tons of fun. It really does.
Yeah, and the best part of it is that it is a completely personal story, except that it works for absolutely anyone.
Here's how,
and it turns the player into the bad guy for a little bit, and that could be really fun.
Can I tell you how I think it would be more fun though? Would be to alternate it between the Undine and the real you. So that at certain scenes, you're playing as the Undine version of you, and then it will switch to another part of the ship, and you're playing as the real you. And you have to figure out which one is the real you.
I'm concerned that would get really confusing.
It could. But maybe that's sort of the point. Playing with the nature of what is real.
Yeah. I definitely kind of wanted to have an ending scene where you have the your duplicate has returned to his Undine form, and you get to talk to him at the end,
or kill him.
Maybe.
Maybe there's a choice.
Oh, there you go.
A choice: let him live or not.
But yeah,
maybe you find out he wasn't so bad.
I know. Either way, I've kind of offered to Drogon to.
Yeah, I know. I think it's a very cool mission, and I think it'd be a fun collaboration. I mean, we've talked about doing collaborations before, and one of these days we will get to it, perhaps.
But yeah, I mean, I can't draw part 2 right now, but at the same time,
no, and I have to actually maybe finish a project one of these days. Every mission I have finished. I've published 3 because I do have my challenge entry is out there actually and published. I made the deadline, even if we're finding out that right now Smirk is on the forums. He's asking if we want to extend the deadline or get ready with voting. Mine's been done the whole time, and I'm personally I'm cool either way, and I posted that. But so every mission I've published since we started this podcast has been one that I started while we were doing the podcast. All of the 10 missions I had going and the 10 projects I had going, I haven't finished.
I've published 2 and started maybe 6 more. Yeah.
Yeah, I start many and finish few.
We've all been there.
But I'm still faster than Dragoon.
But I'll say this. Every one that I start and don't finish, I learn something new, and I usually take something out of that and put it into the next thing that I'm working on.
That's my problem, is I keep taking the things I learned and putting them back into the same mission.
It just grows and grows.
Pretty much.
Well, let's see. Moving it along, I think I'm the only one with a mission review tonight. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So I played The Wraith by Hypnosnake. His in-game handle is SerpentineOne. This is the second part of his missions. This is his second mission, and it's part 2. I reviewed part 1 on the show last week. So this one picks up 12 hours after part 1, and I actually liked that he told me that because it's something and something that I may add to my mission series when I get around to remastering it, my original one. It's often very hard to sort of get that passage of time across in the Foundry, and so I'm glad that he put that in there. So I know exactly when this is set. This is a few hours, half a day after after the events of part 1. He did a strange thing with this mission that I haven't seen before. He put the objective in the dialogue name box. So under the character, you have the objective that you're on. It's a strange choice. I don't think it's something that I would do. Personally, I like to have the character's name in there because it kind of helps me to get to know them and to really know who I'm talking to. So let's see. For this mission, Starfleet has decoded a message that you got sent in the first part and determined it came from a planet near Klingon space that may be the base of a mercenary called the Wraith, hence the title. So we have to search there for the identity of the person who sent the message, and you kind of get embroiled in this thing between the Klingons and these mercenaries. This person who sent the message may work for the Klingon intelligence apparatus. Could be a defector. Who knows? I won't spoil it. One thing that I really liked is that we dealt with Klingon intelligence. Federation has Starfleet intelligence, and to some extent, Section 31. There's the Tal Shiar. There's the Obsidian Order. It would be silly for the Klingons not to have something similar. And I like that that this plot of his mission kind of centers around that. The Klingons are all about honor and things like that, but they're not stupid. They're going to have spies. And I actually joked around, and I didn't say this last week, and I was kicking myself because I didn't, is that this is like the live action version of the DOF mission, Search for Signs of Klingon Intelligence. Let's see. One of the things that I would suggest to the author to start working on is adding more dialogue branches. Now, he had a few of these, and this is not my strong suit as well, but it seems like the next step in his evolution would be to do some more branching dialogues and some more dialogue choices, especially ones like there wasn't anything, and I've talked about this before, and before I said I didn't want to do it. These days, I think I would do it. Is to have at least a neutral response that might sound good for a Vulcan, and maybe a more hot-headed one that would sound good for an Andorian or a Tellarite, things like that. Just add some more variety so that people can pick something that corresponds to what they think of as their character. I know to a certain extent you gotta push the mission where it's got to go, but you can. Even if it doesn't branch out the dialogue a lot, you can offer some different responses that all lead to the same thing. He has continued his tradition of really cool-looking space maps. He does a very good job with these, especially with regards to three-dimensional thinking. He had this great space station surrounded by all different kinds of mercenaries, all different kinds of ships, some of them on patrols. It was very good looking. I thought it was awesome. Had another case of a first officer, or an officer in general, who did not want me to beam into a hazardous situation. I really like that. I love it when people throw that in. It's very, it very much reminds me of The Next Generation. So I appreciate that whenever that's in. He had a bar. Lots of us have bars. I'm working on a new one right now. One thing I liked about how he populated his bar with tons and tons of people. It was excellent. That's advice I'd have for anybody who's making a bar. Have lots and lots of bar patrons. One piece of advice for everybody is some of his combat mobs and friendly mobs were sort of running around and milling about. If you don't want them to do this, you have to set them to legacy combat. This is something that got changed when they added patrols, and otherwise they'll just sort of run around, and in space they'll sort of fly around in circles until they encounter something. One thing that he had was there's a gas giant planet, and there was a lot of bloom on it. It was just getting white, and it was just whiting out everything. I think to change that, you got to change the backdrops. You got to maybe choose a different backdrop, because of course on custom ones it's not working at all. Let's see, and final words. He had an interesting ending. He revealed who the person was who left you this message, but he didn't reveal everything of what you want. And it ends with this character saying, okay, we're going to have a meeting on your ship. And that's the end of it. Obviously, part 3 will pick up with having that meeting with this person and figuring out why he contacted you in the first place. It was good. It left me wanting to know more. And that's a good place to leave a part 2, I thought. So he's obviously a new author. He's really got the basics down, and only going to get better from here. And it's a great start.
I don't have a review, but I played one of Hypnosnake's missions this week up to a certain point to test a combat for him, and yeah, he's a new author, but you're absolutely right. He's really got the basics down, and he knows how to tell a story. And yeah, I'm totally with you on that one.
It's a great place for a new author to be at.
Yeah,
I think it's always kind of impressive, just some of the new talent that's been coming into the Foundry.
Yeah, I like that we always sort of continually, see new people crop up here and there. It's sort of a continual process. I mean, obviously, people leave the community and go on to other things, but I always like to see new people crop up. And Snake has been somebody who comes into the Starbase UGC chat room a lot, and he's a fantastic guy. Or gal, I don't know. Sometimes we don't know these things.
Well, it would be nice to have a second female Foundry author.
Yes. Currently, I only know of one. I know of a few in the past, but they have since moved on. So speaking of moving on, let's go to our discussion topics. Now, SirBoulevard had a good topic in mind when he asked to come on this week. So tell us, SirBoulevard.
All right, so the topic I wanted to discuss was writing cryptic characters specifically. So, like the NPCs and so forth that Cryptic has already used in story missions who are floating around. I'm specifically talking about ones that we've already gotten an opportunity to meet and interact with. I'm not talking like the ones we have as necessarily as Foundry contacts like Commander Futagami or David Ford. So I was kind of going through this, and I came up with a few basic rules, which characters we need to avoid as Foundry authors because we're dealing just with a kind of a high-risk situation, and which ones we should totally go for with as much pizzazz as we can.
that sounds like an awesome list. I can't wait to hear this.
All right, well
never mind. You go first.
Well, I was going to start with just I have 7 basic rules that I've come up with for writing cryptic characters. Because, as you guys know, I've gotten a chance to do this quite frequently, and I realized there were certain things that just needed to be done every single time I was writing one of these guys. So let's start with the first one, and this one ties back in with what was going on with the MACO controversy. These NPCs are Cryptic's property, and your chosen backstory for them can be overwritten at any time. So all of these NPCs subject to change. What you're writing is essentially fan fiction, and just always remember that. Number 2, these NPCs are not always available as costumes in the Foundry. You may be required to recreate them. The advantage of this is we can also have these characters out of costume, which is kind of nice. Number 3, some NPCs are more prone to Cryptic's characterization than others. I'm going to go over this later in my characters to avoid section. 4, when writing these characters, you're going to have to put your style of writing aside and try to match Kestrel's. This is really important because Kestrel has really defined some of these characters, and you're going to have to match your writing style for how this character talks and behaves. Number 5, you can expand on the character, but never overwrite the character's personality or establish characterization, barring an alternate universe version. So if you end up in that timeline where the Enterprise C didn't die at Narendra, then you can go ahead and change the character. But otherwise, keep to what we know. Number 6. Your version of the NPC, if you're having to recreate them with a custom costume, may become out of date if the character has an art change in the future. I've added this one thanks to the 2410 uniform update. Number 7. These are not your characters. They are Cryptic's characters, and you need to treat them as such. They are part of the existing STO storyline and must be treated with the appropriate respect.
It sounds like good rules. Obviously, to crib a Pirates of the Caribbean phrase, really more of guidelines than rules.
Pretty
Right?
much. Right.
Because it's not like we can enforce anything on anybody. But yeah, no, I
I'm
think
so
that's
glad someone else said it.
This is what I always say. You know, all the stuff that we talk about on the show, it's not like anybody has to do any of it.
Exactly.
Yeah, oh, of course not.
Absolutely.
They are
But
a
no,
lot
no,
of
it's,
really
it's
good
very good.
guidelines,
Yeah,
though.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I can tell you my personal rule when using cryptic characters, more or less don't. Not because I don't want to, not because I don't think that I can follow any of the rules that you set down because I'm a rebel or something, but because I find more freedom as a writer only using them very briefly for things like mission givers or, you know, a brief dialogue at the end or something, rather than trying to involve them. You're absolutely right. I get how your story completely involves so many cryptic characters. My personal rule is I just try not to.
And that's just a difference in take. I'm just
Yeah.
encouraging this for anyone else who wants to do this. But I also have, there are even for someone who likes writing cryptic characters like I do, I also have a list of characters we need to avoid. And I actually got them right here for you guys.
That's the list I'm most interested in, actually.
Well,
Yeah,
here
yeah,
it comes.
Let's hear it.
All right, the first 3 on the list, and the first 3 have the same reason as to why I suggest you don't use them. Admiral Quinn, Chancellor Jimpock, and Admiral Karakek. I'm leaving Datan off of this list simply because I don't really see Datan would be interesting to write, but I don't see a lot of people doing it. And the reason why is all 3 of these characters, especially now that SerpentineOne has come out and we've gotten to see 2 of them in a little bit more of a characterized light, there's at least very clear defined roles for these characters. And it's anything you write, you're not going to be able to quite match. So, in this case.
That's interesting because Admiral Quinn is like the one cryptic character I've really considered writing for.
It's true, and before Surface
So-
Tension, I wanted to write him too, but now it's like, oh, now he's got a really defined personality.
I was
and
about to say your list absolutely changed with Surface Tension
Mm-hmm.
for me.
Yeah.
Like
And-
all 3
and
of
actually
those
the-
characters wouldn't have been there unless.
And actually, for me, the reason I want to write for him is because of Surface Tension, and we talked about it earlier on a few weeks ago on the show.
egg idea.
Yeah, the egg idea is write a mission where he goes back in his memory and figures out where Egg turned into an Undine, where he was replaced. And I mean, my idea, I think I could do it in a way where, it wouldn't have any bearing on any other part of the story and wouldn't change his personality. I think I could probably pull it off.
So for me, Admiral Kara, I think it's Karak, right?
yeah, Karakek, yeah.
Yeah,
Whatever
whatever.
it is.
Something like that.
He's not on that list yet for me. I would still consider him something I could write, but I would write him with as much caution as I would still consider Jempock not on that list. I would use Jempock for a mission giver who says things like, serve the Empire, and, the things that he says when he gives you missions in the game. But I wouldn't use him as a major NPC that I had to try to, characterize in any real way.
I agree. The only time I used Jimpock was for Honor of the Empire, and that's because it was a High Council scene.
Karak, the only reason I wouldn't use him in any way but that is because just because Kestrel hasn't used him in that way yet doesn't mean that she doesn't have as much personality in mind for him as she has for Gempok and for Quinn. At this point, I would consider Quinn just about on the same level with Gempok. I'd only want him to say things like, "Hey, welcome," kind of thing.
Pretty much. So next on the list, these ones should be pretty obvious. We shouldn't be using them anyways, but we have, I myself am guilty of this, Worf and Sela. They are available in the Foundry. Worf is a floating head we can use as a contact, and Sela has a full asset available. Canon characters, dangerous road to cross, you're walking too many fine lines. Use them there sparingly.
Those are the only two I would use, because they're already in there.
Yep.
Sela is a straight up don't use ever, because right now in the story she's gone. Until she comes back, we don't have a place for her. So anything you'd have would be a flashback or non-canon story.
Or
Worf,
something that takes place prior to that incident.
Yeah.
Again, a flashback episode.
Mm-hmm.
But with Worf I'm still okay with using, as long as it's a case of it's related to the character storyline at the beginning of the KDF story missions. Like I am using him in Sands of Gorner only because he's repaying the favor you did for Alexander. And that's it.
And he also does work well as sort of like a mission giver.
Yes, he works good as a mission giver.
See, I see both of them as usable because both of them, both actors' voices now appear in the game. We've been given both of their assets, and if for no other reason, it's not my cup of tea, but a lot of people want to write their own fiction about Ambassador Worf or their own fiction about what's happening with Sela. And if they have given us to my mind, if they have given us the assets to do so, I see no reason to stop people from having the fun they want to have with it.
Well, I will say this, because I did get told this by Bramflakes. But I mentioned earlier that I tweeted him that Sela's asset got updated. He also sent me a tweet saying, "Please do not use Sela's asset. You're crossing into a dangerous line. You could get sued." As they put it,
I see.
Yeah, it's Sela's asset is in there, but it was in there originally when it was the old, not looking like Denise Crosby Sela.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's interesting, because obviously I had never heard anybody comment on that from Cryptic or PWE.
Yeah, no, I have that tweet on my Twitter. I've got it favorited so that I can always go back and go, "Yep, not doing that." But
I may have to revise a plan for a future mission in that case.
Yeah, so just Sela is the one. Worf, I think they're okay with, because we can only use him as a pop-up window.
Yeah, we can only use him as a contact.
So
social map.
With Sela, I just go on the use sparingly and don't write a 3.
It's always
series
and there's always the issue of, do people really report EULA violations at all?
Yes.
Yeah, that does happen. That does happen.
Does it?
It does.
I don't know.
I think people are a little more willing to let go Worf and Sela, though, because who doesn't like seeing them? But people do it. But moving on.
Yes.
Number 3 on the list, Hakeev and Cooper. Again, Hakeev is in the Foundry, but his story has played out. We've gotten we got a character, especially thanks to Legacy of Romulus, we've got a full story arc for him. We've seen a few good Foundry missions, like the one we played on that live stream. It's just that you're very limited in what you can do with him because he's dead. Again, it's a case of you're doing another flashback episode.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Sorry, spoiler alert. This other one, another
Can't
spoiler.
Spoil something that's a year old.
Well, this one,
I'm not breaking up the graphic for that one.
With Cooper, this one, again, spoiler, because this is an ongoing storyline, and that's precisely why I say don't use him.
The other issue for Cooper is that he's not in the Foundry and we can't replicate him.
You can sort of replicate him if you make him a Romulan character. You try to hide the pointy ears, but you can do it.
It sounds more work than I'd want to put into it.
But it's still possible.
All the time.
It's possible,
and I don't like the little weasel. So
exactly. So he's the fact that he's the current, you know what, in focus. It's too soon. Don't do anything with Cooper.
Still, there's
Too
regular
soon.
Cooper. Again, in the case of a flashback.
In case of a flashback, and that might be interesting to explore, but I want to see where they're going with the storyline because we don't even know what happened to that one.
Yeah, but certainly Undine Cooper, there probably may have more plans for him.
Yeah,
That's true. We don't know for sure that he's dead.
Spoiler alert.
we know he's not dead. He showed up in Surface Tension just as a telepath.
No, I meant the actual real Cooper.
We could just call this episode "Spoiler Alert."
Probably should.
I'll throw the graphic. After the fact that we've already
spoiled. Okay, next on the list, the crews of the USS Enterprise and the IKS Bortosk, but not the Lisette, and I'll come back to that later. In the case of the Enterprise F, this has to do with Kestrel writing her short stories. The fact is, a good chunk of their characterization is out of game. And I'm one of the few people who's probably read all of those stories, and I don't feel comfortable writing them even. Because there's just so much character development. How many people are aware that Sean has a dead wife and son? That doesn't come up in game. And so
which I think is kind of unfortunate, actually. I would much rather see those particular little stories in game somehow.
Okay,
Yep.
I'm glad
because I can't get that magazine.
So I guess I'm glad that they're not in game, but where I want them is I want them in like library files at Starfleet Academy, and because we can't touch, Picard or Kirk or Data or Geordi or any character that ever appeared on screen anywhere, and at least get a real version of them up there. Because we can't do that, the fact that the Enterprise F crew and the Bortesque crew are Cryptic creations that we can use makes them not they can't be on my list of things not to use. But they would all be on my list of things to use carefully. That makes sense.
And I actually have a little thing here saying, cameos are okay, but the other thing is we're also seeing the Enterprise with every featured episode right now.
Yeah.
So I think we might see burnout if we try to use them too much. So particularly right now, since we've had, 3 or 4 new missions in a row with the Enterprise F showing up.
Mm-hmm.
And often showing up in the nick of time repeatedly to save the day.
So we need
at least twice.
Yeah, so in this case, and by the way, regarding Kestrel's decision, I know why she's publishing like this. I mean, she's up for an award for them, but she's been pushing CBS to let her write an STO novel for a while, and they won't let her. And so if she's doing this so that she can finally get that novel out, and we get another Star Trek Online gets established as a full series beyond being the game and the one novel that they wrote that didn't sell that well, I am all for that.
Spoil thing. I still kind of want to read that novel.
Yeah, I want to read that too, and I know she's got something big in mind. So, the other thing was I didn't get to talk about the Bortosk. With the Bortosk crew, it's the opposite of the Enterprise. We have very little to go on with them, and so you're kind of having. I mean, we got this last First Contact Day was really the first time we got personalities for them because they didn't have them during their first appearance. And the only developed character is Corin, and I don't think anyone particularly likes Corin right now.
I love Corin.
I'm not a fan.
I don't know what you're talking about. I love her.
I've come to like Corin because I get the meta joke that is her. Corin is if you took her out of the game, she'd be a KDF forumite going, "Why don't we get all the nice things?"
I disagree, but we could talk about it some other time.
Yeah, we'll talk about this some other time.
Yeah, I love the character of Corin, and I think they've given us exactly as authors, or I think that Kestrel has given us what we need to write her at the very least appropriately. And because we don't have very much information on any of the others, except for the personalities that we get from them, if you go through the Day of Honor every year, and see what they're like there, and listen to their conversations when they appear in featured episodes. I think we have enough to write the crew, the Bortas. I really do.
So that's actually the end of the list for the characters not to write. So, and it's kind of the big name, obvious ones. But here comes the characters the player, or us as authors, should write. And the first one on the list is Commander Jirok and the crew of the Lisette. Now, this case, it's very specific because of the limitations we were given by Cryptic. Jirok has enough characterization, and her backstory is from outside of the STO universe. Now, that makes her a really defined character, but it also makes her one that it spans beyond just the game. And even though she's showing up frequently, we've got enough on her to write her beyond that. But we've only had her in a formal setting. The fact that we lack the Romulan Republic uniforms? Write Jirok when she's off duty.
I don't think that girl gets off duty.
So, I guess I would put that whole crew in the same place I put the Bortas and, the crew of the Enterprise. But if you're putting those two in the don't write them category, I would put the crew of the Lisette there for the same reasons. Don't touch them.
Well, I think we will probably find out more about them. I think they will be more included.
That's why,
as we
I
go
wouldn't
on.
touch them right
and
now.
so, I mean, anything you're going to write is, in danger.
And that's why
danger, Will Robinson.
And that's why I said writing them in an off-duty setting is appropriate, because in this case we don't have the assets to make them in an on-duty situation. So getting to see them with their hair down would be a nice way that we could actually explore those characters as Foundry authors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you run into Captain Jirok on shore leave and have a crazy adventure.
Yep, pretty much.
And then you both go back to your respective ships afterwards.
Exactly.
Insert Corin or Sean there as well.
Yes. Or all three, or have all three.
Yeah,
It'd be hilarious.
Basically, I feel like all three of those fall in the same area, whichever area it is. Whether it's don't write them or write them, all three of those crews fall into the same area.
In the case of... Go ahead, Mark.
It'd be hilarious to have a situation where Corin and Jirok were doing something like having an arm wrestling contest.
that actually would be interesting to see.
If only we had that animation.
True. Anyways, because we'd be stuck here all night if we continued this discussion. Moving on to the next character.
That's why it's a discussion topic.
Yeah, it's a discussion topic, but that's a long one for another day.
That's why it's at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Next one on the list, Captain Akira Sulu. In this case, Sulu was one of the first characters to get a voice in the game. If you guys ever played the old Terradome. And so we have an idea of Sulu's personality. We know what ship he flies. We have an idea about the character. And I think if we're going to write any of the captains that we're given, Sulu is the one that would be very interesting. We've got all the Defiant assets because he flies a Defiant. He's a pretty easy to recreate character in the Foundry creator. I just hope they can give us the Odyssey uniform so we can make that accurate to his character on ESD.
Of course, he's not in command anymore.
No, he's not, but there's no reason to say he can't be given a ship temporarily or something. Next on the list is one that I think everyone here would figure was going to be on this list because you guys have all seen me write him, Ambassador Satas. And the reason is, out of all the KDF characters, He has the most defining characteristics, and yet his personal life has never been explored. But we've also got a very strong personality of him being a skilled diplomat, and yet he's very cranky of the Gorn being absorbed into the Empire. He's also very sarcastic, almost hilarious. You know, that line of his from Second Wave. Please tell Commander Andrews I haven't eaten the furniture. And, you know, same episode, we saw him get his hands dirty and start ripping apart Jem'Hadar where everyone else is cowering in the corner. And again, it's just the fact we don't have enough on the character himself, but we know enough about him to see that off-duty, he's a sarcastic, kind of almost grumpy old man, and then on duty he pretends to be a Klingon, which, by the way, I think says a lot about our non-Klingon KDF players' characters. It's just a very interesting dynamic to write. Next on the list, Captain Kurland. You know, drop the mean. I mean, we all do that Kurland here thing, but most people have forgotten that he came to save the character's butt at one point in The Trouble with Klingons.
Yep, he did. He sure did. Please make Kurland cool.
Now here's a question. Is he a character from TNG?
He is not. I actually double checked on it. There is a Jeremy Kurland from TNG.
In the one where Wesley's taken that test to see if he was going to go to the academy or something like that.
Yeah. No,
and this kid freaks out and steals a shuttle.
Yeah, that was Jeremy Kurland, which makes me wonder. Yeah, it makes me wonder if James Kurland wasn't supposed to be an XP of that guy. Like, you know, we don't want to pay for the guy, so we'll just make him a new character. But the thing about Kurland that makes him interesting is that his entire senior staff has either been killed and replaced with an Undine or got killed off by Jem'Hadar. And he also, his character model is very sickly. He has an off-green looking skin. He's kind of overweight. It makes me wonder if Kurland isn't ill in some way. And I think there's a lot of ways you can write that.
That just reminded me of how we actually see one of his senior staff members die.
Yeah.
It's true. He's got that hanging around on his conscience.
He does not have the best luck. That's a very true statement.
So Kurland,
someone has to graduate at the bottom end of the academy class, right?
Yep.
Yeah, but how does that person get Deep Space Nine?
They wouldn't trust him with an actual starship?
Well, they trust him with the Defiant. Then again, it's the Ben Sisko's mother effing pimp hand, so...
You know what? They trust him with the Defiant, which at this point is how old?
It's still the Defiant.
It's still the
40
Defiant.
years.
How many times has it been rebuilt since Sisko was on it?
Once.
At least.
Only once. So.
Does plot armor degrade with time?
Next on the
all things that could be explored in a Foundry mission. But go ahead to your next one.
Okay, next one, and I know that everyone in the Foundry Roundtable chat was going, no, don't say this character, Tovin Kev. And I'm adding also Satra, Hyven, and Veril, and here's why. Tovin and the Romulan crew are the only characters we can say for sure are on the Romulan crew. And it's a waste of an opportunity.
And actually, Tovan is the only one, because the other ones can be dismissed.
They can be dismissed, but there's no reason why you can't recreate them in the Foundry and say, oh, no, I'm just back on board for some reason or another. You can add that as a dialogue option to hand wave it. But so it's, this case, those four characters, and I guess you could also put Devex in there, but I don't know many people who like Devex. I love
Devex. He's my favorite of those boffs, actually. He's great to have on the ground.
But the point I'm coming from... Okay, Dragoon.
I was going to say, how do you get around the fact that he may or may not be one of the player's boffs?
The way I work it is you don't include him as a contact. In this case, you just tell them, like, here's what your away team needs to be. And, you know... Yeah,
just a note at the beginning that says, please slot Tovan Kev in such and such spot.
Yep. and you can work through it. You can also say at the beginning of a mission, hey, your buffs are not with you. Please set your bridge officers to stay in this one place, and then you'll run into them as contacts later on. That's another way you can do it. You can just always
cool.
You can always work around that.
I could use that weird pathing problem with triggered force.
Yep.
Well, one thing I thought of while we were discussing this has to do with the customization of the bridge officers, because you could do something that's similar to their default appearance, but there are some people like me who have a certain antipathy towards certain aspects of their default appearance. Like, for example, Varel. I remember what the original version of Varel looked like in the Legacy of Romulus beta, and I liked that look a lot better than the default appearance that we got when it went live on holodeck.
Right.
So
I
I customized all of mine to look like and not the new Varel.
Oh yeah, and I mean I've got 7 Romulan characters, and I have 7 very different looking Tovan Kevs. So I mean that it's challenges to overcome, but I think it could definitely be done. It could be interesting. We're getting close to our time limit, so real quickly run through the rest of your list here.
Okay, so the rest of the list is Franklin Drake, for obvious reasons.
We've already seen some good ones for him.
I was gonna say he gets used quite a bit.
Yeah, he gets a lot of play.
He does. The other one is the minor NPCs and shopkeepers, like for instance, Phineas Q Mudd is a good example of someone. They'll likely never see character development, so you're pretty safe with them, although Cooper and Egg have proven us otherwise. And then I've got a short list of potential stories. Captain Sulu-centric missions, a day on our space dock, doing Klingon diplomacy with Stas, Jirok on shore leave, working alongside the Defiant and the DS9 crew, any Section 31 stories involving Drake, which may or may not involve anything else on this list, Romulan bottle show involving Tobin and the Romulan crew on a starbase or planet side due to the lack of Romulan sets, Linea's origin for Quinn's secretary, since we got the gateways to Delta Quadrant open, take Linnea back to Ocampa on a diplomatic mission, and Phineas Q Mudd, where he becomes a nuisance to your crew like his ancestor was to Kirk.
Why he keeps bugging me in sector space even though I'm not talking to him?
Yeah.
Yeah, really.
I think there's a lot of potential there, and I mean I know some of us have already done some of this, and I know actually Hippie and I think used the same NPC at Starfleet Academy.
In two different ways.
Sarki in 2 different ways. So obviously, I mean, there's upsides and downsides to doing it, but it can be a lot of fun.
Yep. I actually would like to get the community as a whole, because we've only got those 7 MACOs now. I've thought about us getting together as a community on Starbase UGC and giving them all names, and they can be a recurring MACO squad.
That is a brilliant idea. Like this is the MACO squad that every player has on their ship.
The only problem
It's
is,
full of these 7 guys.
Are we at risk of repeating the mistake we just dealt with, where Cryptic can change NPCs at any time?
We are, but there's no reason not to have a little fun with it, right?
Exactly. I mean, it just happened when it's another 4 years until they change the costumes again.
Yeah.
Nothing is certain in an
I think that's a
MMO.
brilliant idea, and I think we ought to do it. So, someone go start that thread on the Starbase UGC forum, and we'll start talking about it. So, before we end tonight, one of the things I wanted to say, we're here on New Romulus, obviously celebrating the anniversary of the faction. Hippiejohn is somewhere.
I'm just not in the same instance, you guys.
Not in the same instance.
Yeah,
okay.
Guys are full.
And this is one of the things that we do have interact objects and doors and things on New Romulus. I don't think it's utilized a lot.
For good reason.
I think it'd be fun to see it utilized more. Yeah, I mean, there's
only 50th level characters can get here.
Well, that's not really even an issue. The issue is the doors they give us. I mean,
and I haven't looked at that a lot. There's
Yeah,
caves, right?
There are caves and one building that's not connected to anything in the staging area. I wish they would give us just the big door to New Romulus
Be nice.
as it would make it all different.
It would be nice, yes.
And obviously, also, this map or portions of it in the Foundry for us to be able to edit and add to the missions as a custom map. Or, the pieces, like the big bridge or the wall or some of the buildings. I mean, some of these buildings we do have. Or, the ground textures or the rocks. We don't have any rocks. We can't replicate any of this look in the Foundry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, you could do something
Also,
maybe on the other side of the map, on the other side of the planet or something.
I've noticed that some of the plants we have here are found in two places that I have seen. One, New Romulus. Two, Champions Online.
And also
Yeah.
some now in the New Earth space dock.
No, they took them out of the New Earth space dock
Oh,
because
did they?
they were too New Romulusly, which I don't like the replacement plants because
Well,
I liked that little bonsai tree by the waterfall. That looked nice.
they have replaced all the alien plants, or most of the alien plants, I should say, on ESD with things that are actually identifiable as being species from Earth.
Well, I mean, one of the reasons I'm talking about this is because I would like to, see more missions made for Romulan captains and, more fleshing out of my Romulan mission list. So, I mean, even just some small missions where you run around here and, then go to a custom map or something, I think it would be a lot of fun and would help fleshing out Romulans. I mean, we need more Foundry missions for Romulans. And unfortunately, I mean, we got to do it the hard way right now.
And the fact is, New Romulus, it would be so much better to work if we just had something. If we had more Romulan assets, because here it is. What we have are the ability to write Romulan civilian stories, but we have no Romulan civilian assets to work with that are not costumes.
Yeah. So it's tough. It's a tough needle to thread, but just something I want to put that out there to the community. The other thing is, next week, actually next weekend, we are going to do our 60th show. And for it, we thought we would do another live stream of Foundry building. So what we're going to do is revise our mission that we built, I guess, was it December that we built that mission? Making Diplomacy Go was the name of it. It involved taking a diplomat out to the Delta Quadrant to meet with the Voth. And you got attacked by Undine on the way, or actually intervened in an Undine attack on the Voth. Obviously, since then, surface tension has come out and stepped between the stars, and we're actually sort of on the other side of that conflict now.
Yeah.
We're actually probably more worried about the Undine than the Voth. So, I think what we should do in the meantime is all of us should play it, and I encourage anybody else out there to play it and start brainstorming ideas to revise it. And then we'll do some revising next Saturday. So join us then.
All right. Time for contact info.
Huzzah!
Throw up the contact info.
All right. We can be reached at by email at foundryroundtable@live.com. Bergen, do you ever actually check that?
Only when you mention that.
Well, what might work better is if you contact us on Twitter at Foundry Roundtab. Jorgen can be reached, and you can tell him that he needs to check email at Jorgen1701. Hippiejohn can be reached at Hippie_John.
Or at STO Miranda.
Yes,
Apparently-
Miranda Mayhem is on Twitter now.
I don't expect Twitter to last the week. And I can be reached at Greendragoon with 2 O's, Mark.
2
And
O's.
Markhawkman can be reached via the forums usually, quite easily.
I have a Twitter now.
Oh, you do?
Markhawkman.
Whoa!
Not that I actually have done anything with it besides creating the account, mind you, but still.
I'm gonna so follow you now.
Yeah, of course.
This changes everything.
Changes everything. And our guests can be reached at SirBoulevard. Boulevard is spelled with a U, for anyone who didn't know that. And I guess that will be it for us for tonight. So everybody have a good night and enjoy your Memorial Day weekend if you're an American, or enjoy your normal weekend if you're one of those iffy foreigners.
I think somebody said that the British have a bank holiday this weekend.
Oh, do they?
Maybe they
Happy
get
stuff
something
and things.
Yep.
else. All right. Well, good night, everyone.
Well, thanks for joining us. Good night, everybody.
Good night,
Good
everybody.
night.